puts all the eggs in one basket. Hebrews is a great summary book, and Romans is one of the greatest of these. Romans is one of the great summary books of the Bible. It's not only true that Romans contains a great summary of salvation, but it's also true that it contains verses which help to summarize many other books of the Bible. It contains verses which help to summarize many other books in the Bible. Listen while I read several verses from Romans and tell me what book of the Bible is beautifully summarized by each of these verses. I'll just give you 4 illustrations of this. What book in the New Testament is summarized by Romans 8:17? Romans 8:17 says, heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. How many of you think, somebody thought I'd tell us again? Yeah, that's a great summary of Ephesians, see? Heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. That's not in Ephesians, but it's a summary of the book of Ephesians. Heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. What New Testament book is summarized by Romans 6, verse 10? Now, you may think of other books in addition to the ones that I have in mind. Romans 6:10, the death that he died unto sin once for all. But the life that he liveth unto God. 1 Peter, to a degree, the one I had in mind was Hebrews, the book of Hebrews. And what book in the New Testament is summarized by Romans 8:15? For ye received not the spirit of bondage again unto fear. But ye received the spirit of adoption, full-grown sonship, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. That's the book of Galatians. And oh, how God used that book to bring the church out of the bondage of Roman Catholicism. You know, I'm going to be teaching Galatians to those in the midweek service at this church. And I think of it especially in terms of Martin Luther. One commentator said that the book of Galatians was the pebble in the sling with which Martin Luther slew the papal giant. He slew the papal giant by God's power. Some others were used of God to help along with him. Of course, I have to mention John Knox, one of my favorites, along with Martin Luther, John Calvin, and a lot of those great men of God. They're in my future. They're not just in my past. I read about them. So, you know, you think about some things in the past, it makes you feel real musty, you know, like an old book. It's real musty way in the back. Those men are in my future. I'm going to be with them through all eternity. And then, what book in the Old Testament is summarized by Romans 5:20? Where sin abounded, grace did much more abound. Now, the one I have in mind is one of the minor prophets. You may have others too. But what book in the Old Testament is summarized? Where sin abounded, yes. Is this the same one giving us the answers all the way? Was that Brother Giles over there? You know, well, he hadn't had these books. That dear old rascal, I tell you, it's just a blessing to me to fellowship with him. He's got a new church now, and moved over beyond Lake City. And do pray for him, and I hope that one thing we'll do, and I want to do it more, is to pray. And I wish you preachers and the rest of you, any of you who have special requests, this is a part of my seeking to go forward in my prayer life. And I really thought too much that the main thing I'm to do here is to teach. I don't think it is. I think the main thing I'm to do is to pray. To pray for the crisis and pray God will lead me in the book, but to pray for you folks who are in the crisis. And so I would just love to have you write out on a slip of paper some things. Now, don't come out and just ask for money particularly, because if you make your needs known, that's fine, but don't just ask for it. I've had people ask, well, will you do this? I'd rather not do that because it kind of cramps me. But I'd love making needs known, and then I'll just take it to the Lord to see. I think some kind of feel that they ought to stay away from me because don't do that. Don't do that. But on the other hand, don't just come and ask. I've told some of you, I've had people ask me to repeat this about my dad, that he took me with him when after Dad was saved. He was out of politics then, and then he was saved, and they asked him to come back to some of the old communities where he'd been in politics, and I gladly went with him. I sacrificed to go with him because we had dinner on the ground, and in one of the places, Dad spoke, and then Mr. J. Fred Johnson, one of his friends from Kingsport, had introduced him and told him about those wagon wheels. He said that he had this vivid recollection in his mind of my dad going to work 5 o'clock in the morning. You see, Dad was a heavy drinker before he married. Mother promised him she'd marry him if he went sober for a whole year. She told me many times if she had to do it again, she didn't know whether she'd take the chance or not. But it wasn't a chance because it was in God's will. But he was in debt, I think, when he married, and then he borrowed $3,000 to start himself off in business. And then he had horses, and by the way, those horses were burned in a fire in the barn. That was after Dad went into politics, when the barn burned down, and some people thought it was deliberately set by his political enemies. We didn't know it absolutely, but he thought that. And Dad got up in the morning, 5 o'clock, and so Mr. J. Fred Johnson introduced him and said, those wagon wheels, those wagon wheels. And then at the close, after Dad spoke, Mr. Johnson was quite dramatic, and it appealed to me because I love my dad so much. If you love a person, you love things like this about him. And he said, all the way through that message, I thought I could hear those wagon wheels. Then I thought, well, sometime when I'm in a group, particularly a group of young people, I can tell that, and then one person will talk to another as he leaves, and he says, boy, I really like that message. You did? What'd you like about it? I said, would it speak to your heart? No, it didn't speak to my heart. But I like that about those wagon wheels. Those wagon wheels. So one of them comes up to me and says, let me show you what I mean. He's all out of breath, and he says, Mr. Sauls, I need $100, and I hope you'll listen to those wagon wheels. I tell you that to know kind of what's going on in my own mind and what I think's going on in yours. Folks, don't stay away from me because of that. If I don't think God wants me to give to you, I won't give to you. But if you can make the needs known, that's fine. But then don't be hurt if I don't always do it, because sometimes I may have to check my banker before I can do anything like that. All right, no extra charge for that. I'm rambling all around this morning. So, overall summary. Good. These 4 books in the Bible, Romans just summarizes those completely. That's a wonderful summary of the book of Hosea, where sin abounded, grace did much more abound. And by the way, Brother Giles hasn't heard me teach those particular books, but he loves the Word of God, and I love the Word of God, and I sort of like him too. My 12th general impression of Romans is connected with the letter M. Missionary vision. Missionary vision. The book of Romans is a great book of theology, and it's a great book of missionary vision. No theologian is a true theologian if he doesn't have missionary vision. I believe that's true. Theology can seem awfully cold and hard. You read a book. But if it follows the pattern of Romans, it's not cold and hard. Nobody's a true theologian if he doesn't have missionary vision. Now listen to Romans 1:14 to 16. I started on this and I think sidetracked. Romans 1:14, I am debtor, both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to the wise and to the foolish. Dr. Glover wrote an excellent book on the history of missions. He was of the China Inland Mission School of Writers. Boy, they were strong writers. Dr. Glover, a great writer on missions, and Henry W. Frost, a great writer on missions, and great writer on themes of the Bible. The only thing I have against Dr. Frost is he didn't write enough. I just love his writing. I think personally, I consider the best book I've ever read on the second coming of Christ is Dr. Henry W. Frost's book on the second coming of Christ. Somebody's asked me about it, and I think I had him write Erdman's. Erdman's published it in Grand Rapids. Whether you can still get that or not, I don't know. But now, that doesn't follow just exactly a prescribed way. If you've got everything figured out, exact order in which things are going to come, don't read that book. But I don't try to follow just that way that everybody else thinks. It goes like this. But it's filled with Scripture, and I think it's warm-hearted, and he's to be trusted. He's going in the right direction, although you might not agree with him at every particular point. Here's what he says. I am debtor. He says, missions is not a charity. Missions is a debt. Missions is not a charity. Missions is a debt. You see the difference? If I regard missions as a charity, and most church members do, then I feel rather virtuous when I give to missions. But I don't feel virtuous when I pay my debts. I'm dishonest if I don't pay my debts. If I lack a missionary vision, God calls me dishonest. If you lack in missionary vision, God calls you dishonest. Well, I tell you, folks, that's strong language. But that's the language of the Bible. I am debtor, and I am dishonest if I don't pay my debts. Chapters 9, 10, and 11 in particular are great chapters on missions. Did I mention this last time? In the 15th of Romans, Paul says, I preach the gospel not where Christ is already named, that I might not build on another man's foundation. And I used to think, well, some are called to that. Some are called to be pioneer missionaries, and they don't build on another man's foundation. But God has spoken to me through that verse, and I believe that any Christian who's in God's will has special applications of that. Brother Preacher, are you in any way preaching where you're not building on somebody else's foundation? That's not true in the absolute sense, because people know the English language. You've got the English Bible. It's translated. And you're building on another man's foundation. But I'm not talking about that. This illustration for me, my great illustration of that, used to be the public schools, where I could give the gospel and not build on another man's foundation. Why, the person told me in one of those schools somebody mentioned Jesus, and one of the children said, who's he? I never heard of him before. In America, in one of our public schools. Now those schools are close to me. And I wish you'd pray for me that these closing years of my life, that God will give me more opportunities to practice this and not build on another man's foundation. Not build on another man's foundation. There's a place to do it, but I believe God has that for every Christian. How many of you preachers believe that now you have definite cases where you preach the gospel, where you're not building on another man's foundation? How many of you think that's true? You have to have some hands. Raise your hand, preachers, if you think you're preaching and you're not building on another man's foundation. I believe that God has a special application of that to everybody. For years I just dismissed that. I thought, I'm not called to be a pioneer missionary. Pioneer missionaries have that true album. But I believe every Christian has that. And that's just one other illustration of the fact that one of the greatest books ever written on missions is the book of Romans. My 13th general impression of Romans is connected with the letter A, authoritative anthropology. Those are rather big words. Let me spell them for the kids. Authoritative, A-U-T-H-O-R-I-T-A-T-I-V-E. That's just the adjective from authority. A-U-T-H-O-R-I-T-A-T-I-V-E. Anthropology. Anthropology is just the study of man. Anthropos is the Greek word for man, mankind. A-N-T-H-R-O-P-O-L-O-G-Y. Anthropology. A-N-T-H-R-O-P-O-L-O-G-Y. Anthropology is the study of man. One of the greatest values of Romans is that it is God's inspired check on the study of anthropology. One of the great chapters on anthropology in the Bible, you say you go back to the opening chapters of Genesis. That's true. But the first chapter of Romans, and many in their talking of anthropology completely ignore the first chapter of Romans. I'll tell you, even some missionaries, in their emphasis on missions, ignore the first chapter of Romans. They don't mean to do it, but they do it. These things don't come naturally, folks. I have to pray the Holy Spirit open my eyes to see, and how blind I naturally am. And you have God open your eyes to see how blind you naturally are. There's only one authoritative way to study anthropology, and that's to study it as a subdivision of theology. If you take books on theology, you have different parts of theology. Pneumatology on the Holy Spirit, soteriology on salvation, Christology on the person and work of Christ, and then you have anthropology, the study of man, but it's a subdivision of theology. Many young people have been turned away from God's will through their study of anthropology. And I tremble when I find out that some Bible colleges and seminaries have this department on anthropology. Because you say, well, they're teaching it from the orthodox point of view. The question is, are they? Are they? One of my former students applied for missionary work to a missionary organization in which he had confidence. And they recommended that in his final preparation for the mission field, he take studies in anthropology at the University of Pittsburgh. He followed what the mission told him to do, went to the University of Pittsburgh, took anthropology and lost his faith and stayed away from the mission field. And you say, he was to blame, yeah, and University of Pittsburgh was to blame, yeah, and that mission society was to blame. That mission society was to blame. I say to folks, those things go deep. And some missionaries and missionary societies are being corrupted by the influences of anthropology. Here's one illustration of it. Missionary literature contains much emphasis upon the idea that we must not try to make American Christians out of the heathen. Let me ask for hands, how many of you have heard that? Was not try. I tell you folks, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. You say, is there any truth? Sure, there's truth in it. There's truth, but that's a dangerous thing. For example, a missionary visiting in my home some time ago told of a missionary from one of the independent mission boards, and it's considered to be one of the best of the mission boards, who said that it was not wrong for the heathen to go without clothes, because that's a part of their culture. Now that was from what is called a fundamental mission board. And you see what some would say, if you tell the heathen they're supposed to wear clothes, you're making American Christians out of them. No, you're not. You're teaching them the standards of God. teaching there's a difference. And you see, a person can often talk up anthropology by calling attention to what he thinks is some of the good features. But the study of anthropology has greatly weakened missions. It's greatly weakened it. And that's one reason why we need to come for our anthropology to the book of Romans. I told you earlier that we're going to come to study these 7 great facts about the heathen in the book of Romans. Of course, one is in chapter 1. How did the heathen become heathen? How did they become what they are? Well, you know, you start back with Adam and Eve, who had the knowledge of God, and then man went down and down and down, and then in the flood, God gave man a fresh start. Then you have the 3 sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and from them the whole world was overspread. Yeah, and they had the knowledge of the true God. See, that was a long time after creation, when the flood came. A long time after they had the knowledge of the true God. 3 times in Romans 1 you have this expression, God gave them up. They refused God according to the light God had given them. God gave them up. 3 times repeated, God gave them up. God gave them up. That's how the heathen became heathen. You see, they didn't start off without the knowledge of God. They had the knowledge of God. And in the flood, God wiped out those who departed from the knowledge of the true God. Gave them a fresh start. But then more and more man went away. And oh, look at the nations of the world today. God gave them up. Well, you say, well, he gave them up, so we're to give them up. No, see, Romans says that. How they became heathen, then it says don't give them up. See, God gave them up to their not, because they refused God according to what God had given them. But then it says, Romans 10:13 to 15, one of the great passages on missions in the entire Bible. You see, there's so much of that missionary freedom. I'll tell you, there's one, I think I can say this without being traced to any particular person, but there's a former member of the faculty at the Bible College. He was a very good friend of mine. And I think he used of the Lord. But he was with the heathen. They didn't wear clothes. And he said, don't talk to them about that. He said, they're more moral than we are. Well, that wouldn't be much if they're more moral than we are. But imagine, folks, somebody who's a faculty member at the Bible College who says something like that. This stuff is spreading through the church. And anthropology has to be guided in a special way. If somebody majors in anthropology, just think of that young fellow who went to the University of Pittsburgh and just turned away from the mission field. And the Mission Society told him to do that. Told him to do that. That's just my 13th general impression. And then I'll give you the other 2 next time.